Thank
Welcome.
you, Rabbi.
I'm so happy to welcome you, Mr. O'Toole, Leader O'Toole. I remember speaking to you a few months ago, and you promised me this would happen. So I am very grateful and can vouch that you're a leader who keeps his word.
Well, thank you, Rabbi, and thank you for remembering we talked about this opportunity. Sadly, we're still doing it by Zoom, and I can't be at Beth Tikva in person, but let's hope that I can be next time. But I hope this finds everyone well, and I look forward to the discussion.
That's great. So I would love to introduce you, but we don't have time to introduce you. So I'm just going to tell everybody, if you want to know about Erin O'Toole and his story, go to Wikipedia, do a Google search, type in his name, and you'll save me the effort of going through his biography, because we really do want to talk about the issues tonight. So Erin, we've spoken on the phone. Asher, you haven't met yet. We introduced him before. Both of us, we're gonna pitch you some questions that we've reviewed together on topics that we actually just reviewed with the audience tonight. Explain to everybody why we chose these questions. And I think all they want is, they want to know from the heart what you really think, what you really feel. They don't want talking points. They don't want the party platform. They want to hear from you. So why don't I start off? One of the things that we talked about on our phone call a few months ago is a topic that I found you to be very eloquent on, and that's Canada's relationship with China. You have been very critical of the Chinese record on human rights. You spoke up recently on its genocidal treatment of the minority Uyghur population. Now, you're speaking tonight to a Jewish community very aware of the dangers of human rights abuses and the necessity for free countries to confront them. We have images of the 1936 Berlin Olympics in mind, and it is very hard not to draw a comparison to the upcoming 2022 Olympics in Beijing. You've called for a relocation of these games, but you have stopped short of advocating that Canada boycott them if they go ahead. So my first question is whether you could clarify your position on this issue. If you were Prime Minister, would you or would you not send Canadian athletes to Beijing next winter?
Well, thanks, Rabbi. I have said repeatedly that I think there is still time to relocate the games so that the Olympic spirit and the athletes don't pay the price of being used as propaganda tools by the regime in Beijing, but are allowed to compete. And if there's ever a time that we have to show some innovation with respect to the Olympic Games, it's during a pandemic. So I've not only said it should be relocated, I've said that Canada should take the lead and offer to host some of the events, possibly hockey, because we do have a bit of an affinity for that. But I think it's up for us to work with our allies to try and relocate. I still think there's time where we could have certain set of sports on each continent, but working with our allies, I don't think we should be turning a blind eye to the fact that a genocide is taking place in Xinjiang while there's a feting and hosting and acting of normalcy in another part of a country that's organizing a systemic genocide against a minority population. So we've been dealing with the Canadian Olympic Committee. I'm always upfront. I don't try and do political stunts on people. They know we're building towards pushing for Canada to ask allies not to participate in this type of games.
Thanks for your answer. Asher, you're going to push him a little bit more on China.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Mr. O'Toole, for being here tonight. In the Hub today, a new online publication, there's an author named Janice Stein, and she wrote an article today where she offers this very sobering view on Canada's future relationship with China. She says we basically have to pick one of two paths. Either we're going to become fully integrated with the Americans and essentially do whatever they do and not have any real foreign policy with respect to China, or we walk softly and carry a small stick, meaning we stay out of China's way, we try to stay out of America's way, and we try and maintain some semblance of autonomy. Is there a third way for Canada? Is there a way to stand up to China and also be independent?
Absolutely. And I've enjoyed Professor Stein's commentary on foreign affairs for many years. I've been proposing a third way for some time, which is for us to use the Five Eyes Security Alliance, Canada, the United States, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand, to provide a counterbalance, because I often say Canada is smaller in terms of population and economic clout compared to China, but we're a giant when it comes to our commitment to our values. And we should work with countries that share those values to counteract the pressure China can bring with the size of its economy. So I've done this in a few ways, directly through Five Eyes, but also through an initiative called CANZUC, which is where Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, with shared legal systems, shared parliamentary traditions, a shared head of state, could all coordinate a joint approach with respect to trade, with respect to human rights, with respect to intelligence sharing, which we already do to a degree within the Five Eyes, but we should have a uniform position on Huawei, for example. Right now, out of the Five Eyes, those closest allies to Canada, only Canada under Mr. Trudeau has still allowed for Huawei to be contemplated as part of the 5G network for our country's digital future. That is out of step with now 3 US administrations. Mr. Trudeau has approved the takeover of Canadian defense and security firms with Pentagon contracts to state-owned Chinese enterprises. That is why we are seen as out of step with our American allies. So we are at a crossroads, and there is really no choice. We are a strong, liberal Western democracy that has to recommit to those principles, to those values, and work with our allies to start putting the pressure on the bad actors of the world, like China, who game the global system when it comes to human rights, the rule of law, and international trade. I think there will be a realignment of these values in these relationships over the next 25 years, and Canada has to lead it so that we can benefit from it.
And some commentators have used the phrase Cold War, a new Cold War, to describe this alignment, the realignment that's occurring. Is that an apt term in your view, or is our relationship defined by something else?
I used the term last year, Asher. I think yes. Just ask the 2 Michaels, who I think, if I remember my Globe and Mail this morning, are at about 828 days in captivity as diplomatic hostages. Ask the Uyghurs, as we talked about. There's 300,000 Canadian citizens living in Hong Kong, which is now a police state. It's not the one country, two systems handover agreement between the United Kingdom and China. And the South China Sea Islands, which are being constructed in an area where 70% of the world's trade flows. And there's a creeping surveillance state within China and a creeping cybersecurity foreign policy of the Chinese government and its state enterprises. So there is a Cold War, and it began in 2017 when President Xi in the 19th People's Congress actually reasserted an even stronger dominance of the Communist Party in all aspects of that country. And I think we can't just look at the trade opportunities and turn a blind eye to human rights abuses, security abuses, rule of law abuses. This is where we have to work with allies to counterbalance it.
Thank you. Rabbi, did you want to ask?
Yeah, I want to contrast that sobering view of China to what it means to be a democracy. Erin, I want to ask you about cancel culture. It seems to me that the list of Canadians, living and deceased, who have been targeted for cancellation just grows longer by the day in Canada. I think both of us will agree that free speech and free expression are essential in any democracy. But what do you say to those who argue that we need to have a culture of consequences so that we can hold institutions accountable, individuals accountable when there has been injustice, and that we need to cancel in order to promote and include the voices of minorities who perhaps have been silenced for far too long in civil discourse?
That's an interesting question, Rabbi. I think the way cancel culture is being used is not, as you might suggest, that we're raising or amplifying traditionally unheard voices or voices that have been at the margins or not given the podium. What cancel culture is increasingly being used for, particularly by activist groups, particularly if you're brave enough to go on a platform called Twitter, it's being used to not allow informed and responsible debate. So rather than saying, I disagree with you and I believe X, cancel culture is increasingly, if you don't agree with my point of view, you are a bad person, or your point of view is so abhorrent because it doesn't agree with mine that it needs to be shunned from the public sphere. It is an assault on the freedom of speech, and it's actually a decline in political discourse. And so I've been talking about it for many, many years. It started with presentism, where we judge the history of the country, like Sir John A. Macdonald and things like that, alongside the point of view and morals we have today. What is better? Is it better learning and addressing the blights in our historic record, or is it better to just erase them and pretend they didn't happen? I think it's better to learn. And I'll use an example, Rabbi. When I was the Veterans Affairs Minister, I was Stephen Harper's last cabinet appointment. And my goodness, after only a couple of weeks in the job, I got to speak in Emancipation Hall of the US Capitol. So I think since Brian Mulroney, I may have been the only Canadian politician to speak in the US Capitol building, because the Devil's Brigade from World War II, a Canada and US joint unit, were receiving the Congressional Gold Medal. And I got to speak, I think, right after John Boehner and right before Nancy Pelosi. Here was a kid from Bowmanville who'd been a minister for a grand total of 2 weeks.
Right.
And who did I speak about? Of all the veterans in that unit, I spoke about an Indigenous veteran, Tommy Prince, who was decorated for bravery by both the Canadians and the Americans. And what I try and do is hold up those heroes that may not have had the light shine on them. Rather than canceling, let's hold up parts of our history that weren't properly told or represented or respected. So I've tried to do that in my public life. And I think part of our democracy means you have to be able to agree or disagree without being disagreeable. And cancel culture is getting to a point that the dominant crowd, usually on social media, won't condone any point of view. And I think that's bad for democracy.
I have a follow-up, but we don't have time. Asher, you go next.
Okay, thanks, Rabbi. Mr. O'Toole, I want to take you back to a phrase you said, the rule of law. I want to ask you a question about the Supreme Court of Canada. Because over the last few years, and I think not a lot of people necessarily know this, but there's been a very lively debate, both in the legal academy and among a lot of judges, about how law should be interpreted, especially the Constitution, especially the Charter and other provisions of the Constitution. And the next Prime Minister is going to have an opportunity to appoint at least one Supreme Court justice, probably more, to say nothing of all the other lower court justices. So if you were elected Prime Minister, what sort of philosophy, judicial philosophy, would you look for in a judge?
Well, first of all, any decision will be made based on merit. And that has to be the overriding consideration. And I was involved in some discussions about appointments of judges, including to the Supreme Court when I was in the Conservative government. And merit has to be the overriding principle, and that's legal excellence in the area of practice and contributions to the profession through either writing, professional development, or teaching. I think a commitment to the law. And I think for the Supreme Court, one thing I will also look for is a commitment to the second language. I don't think you have to come in bilingual. I learned my French in the military, and if you want to be prime minister, as I do, or if you want to be a judge on our highest court, a commitment to constantly improve or learn that second language, as Beverly McLaughlin did, as Malcolm Rowe, the latest judge, did. In terms of, you're talking more the U.S. route, where strict constructionists versus living tree doctrine. I want to see legal excellence, and I do think we've had great judges appointed from appeal courts in like Justice Moldaver, for example. There's also been some spectacular appointments right from the practice of law, from the highest profession, like Justice Sapinka, for example. So I wouldn't categorize it into one group or another, but it has to be that recognition of being committed to the profession, a track record of excellence, and legal writing and or litigation at the highest levels, either in private practice or as a justice of the Superior
But
Court.
Erin, I'm not the lawyer here. Asher's the lawyer. But what's behind his question is, he's arguing cases before high courts in this country. And part of what's influencing to ask this is seeing that some judges are doing a little bit more than making judicial rulings from the bench, that politics are affecting their decisions, and some of their rulings you might call legislating instead of deciding. I'm not sensing in your answer that you feel the same way about the way justices are operating in this country. Is that true?
Well, I think any lawyer who has developed their practice post-charter knows that that's been an aspect of the post-charter jurisprudence in Canada. We're not going to change it, but I think most, as I said, practitioners, particularly in private practice at the highest levels, try and build on precedent and try not to write new legislation. So that would be my commitment. But we don't have the same appointment process to the bench like they do in the United States,
right?
Where there are two dedicated schools and there's almost appellate courts that cultivate that. Here it has to be that commitment to practice. But anyone who has concerns about the court party or these various writings on it, that train left the station in terms of the fact that the charter has had that impact on law. But I've been clear. Parliament is supreme, and Parliament does have the ability to correct the law, rewrite the law, or even use the notwithstanding clause in very, very rare circumstances. So I think someone that's committed to legal excellence is what I would look at.
Sorry, Asher, I had to push that a little bit. I know I'm not the lawyer here. Let me ask you something, Erin, about another issue of great importance to the Jewish community: anti-Semitism. Barry Weiss wrote a great book. By the way, before I ask this question, your aunt Jane is on the call tonight, and she's a member of Beth Tikva. And I want to acknowledge her and thank her for being here. Hi, Jane. Erin, when you speak, you can say hi as well. I know she cares about you and prays for you all the time. So back to anti-Semitism. Barry Weiss, in her book on anti-Semitism, says that North American Jews face a, quote, three-headed dragon of hatred. It comes from the far right, the far left, and radical Islam. According to the Toronto Police, the Jewish community is the most targeted group when it comes to hate crimes in this city. And anti-Semitic hate crimes manifested actually here at our synagogue when a few years ago our property was defaced with pro-Islamic and Nazi imagery and graffiti painted on our walls. Do you think that the government is doing enough to combat anti-Semitism in Canada, including hatred that originates online and hatred that's coming from extremist groups that perhaps are connected to the Muslim Brotherhood or Hizb ut-Tahrir that are operating in Canada?
I think we have to do more. And as public officials, we also have to call out the scourge of anti-Semitism, which has been terrible in recent years. And as I've said many times, and I've said this in the House of Commons on many occasions, it's also spread insidiously into BDS and taking over floats in the Pride Parade. It's also trying to exercise anti-Semitism in ways that it's dressed up in other forms, like we saw with boycott, divest, sanction. These are all ways that they can get this type of hate into campus environments or environments where they're tying it to other causes. And that's why the Conservative Party, we have consistently called it out. We've actually brought a debate to denounce BDS in the House of Commons. And as you know, when Prime Minister Harper, when I was part of that government, we also tried to work with synagogues and communities to make sure that security and some of the costs associated with that were a recognition of the defense of religious freedom. I've talked to many members of the community about how Jewish schools with added security costs and other things are burdening families because they want to know that their children are safe at school. So I think there's a couple of roles for politicians. One is to first denounce and call out this rising anti-Semitism and make sure that there's public consciousness of what happens when there's a blind eye turned to it. And then working with the community in as many ways possible on safety and rooting out hate, whether it's through terror groups, whether it's through organizations. We've been trying with the Liberal government, not just to get them to list the Proud Boys as a terror organization. We've also been saying the IRGC that we demanded years ago to be listed, the Islamic Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, to be listed as terror organization. The Liberals even agreed a few years ago, but then didn't do anything. So we will hold a hard line and work with the
Short
community.
answer is the Liberal government is not doing enough and should be much more focused and energetic about rooting out terror organizations from Canada and getting at the systemic causes for anti-Semitism.
Yes.
Okay, good answer. Asher?
Yeah, Mr. O'Toole, I'm just going to ask you one or two more questions. I want to ask you what conservatism means to you in the year 2021, because I've noticed from some of your statements that you're signaling a sort of pivoting, I think, in what it means to be a conservative. You're less, absolutist on markets maybe than conservatives have been in the past. I think you're signaling a more socially progressive posture. Well, also, I think you're putting forward a very traditional Canadian values position. So with that being said, first of all, do you agree that what it means to be a conservative today is different at all from what it meant to be a conservative 10 years ago? And what do you see as being a small c conservative in Canada in 2021? And big C, but small c first.
Great question. The Conservative Party founded Canada. And I think after Mr. Trudeau, we kind of have to rescue Canada. And every generation of leadership within our party has stepped up to meet the needs of the times. And so we're not running the campaign that Mr. Harper first ran in 2004, or Brian Mulroney ran in 1984, or Diefenbaker or Clark. What we're trying to do is present smart, conservative, principled ideas to tackle the issues of today. We are still the party about individual responsibility, pursuing excellence, free markets, and working hard and keeping the benefits of your labor and taking risks. We are that free market party, but we also want to make sure that people aren't left out and try and build coalitions with working Canadians and business leaders to make sure that our economy moves forward. We have to tackle climate change. It's an area where I think by not participating in the debate in the last 10 years, we allowed our opponents to define us as not caring, when I think we do. We have to have conservative ideas on reconciliation for Indigenous Canadians. I had a call with a chief tonight on this earlier this evening. So I want to make sure in 2021, the Conservative Party, with those core principles, tackles the hopes, fears, and aspirations of Canada in 2021. And in the process, I want to bring in great a new generation of Conservative leadership like Melissa Lantzman in Thornhill. We've got Daniel Lee in Willowdale. I think they're both on the call.
Yes, they are.
This is
Happy
the
to
next
have them.
generation stepping up to tackle the huge debt, the huge tax burden, the corruption of the Trudeau era, in my view. And we want to show what our ideas are from everything from the economy to climate change.
Well, that's probably a good place to leave it. Would you say, Rabbi?
I'd like to give Erin the chance to make a final statement. You have an audience all ears tonight. Many of the meeting for you really in an address to the Jewish community for the first time. I think a lot of people here see Justin Trudeau as continuing some of the policies that were important to the Jewish community from the Harper government, but there are others who are more critical. Why do you think the Conservatives need our support in the next election?
Well, first off, thank you, Rabbi, for the opportunity today, and thank you, everyone, for spending some of your evening with me. I think the Conservative Party, since Stephen Harper and even before, I think we will be resolute friends to the Jewish community and to Israel through fire and ice, and we've been consistent in that regard. I've stood fast on the decision that I made for our previous leader with respect to declaring Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and moving our embassy. I've committed to that. I haven't wavered in it. And these are ways we show support for our ally, and we stand by them. And I want to just say, because you didn't want me to do a big speech and we wanted to get right into it, but it's appropriate, Rabbi, on my screen, my Aunt Jane comes right below you. She's in the box below. So Rebecca, Molly, and Jack and I send our love. And it was her late husband, Paul Goodman, when I was a teenager, was the first time I had discussions about Israel and anti-Semitism and foreign policy. Years before I joined the military, he would send me articles. He pushed me to make sure I just didn't take the coverage at first glance. He always wanted me to look further and to understand. And we lost him far too early, but Jane and his sons remain great friends and great supporters. And like all families, I can't wait till we can hug and see each other again. Our kids love Aunt Jane as well. So we hope we can get through this third wave and spend time together. And I wish that same for you and all your families. I firmly believe Canada's best days are ahead of us, but it takes leadership. We don't need a prime minister that just does the photo op and never has the follow up. I'm not a celebrity. I'm a kid from Bowmanville, but I've served in uniform. I've worked in the private sector. I've given back charities, and I worked with the Harper government in a principled way. And I think I can get this country back on track. So thanks for the opportunity, and best wishes of health to you, Rabbi, and to the whole community.
Thanks, leader. I'm so grateful to you for giving us even the small amount of time that you had tonight. We could have kept going all night, but you probably feel like we've just been hitting you with all kinds of stuff from all angles. We really are nice guys in real life. We just had to be a little bit fast to get it at the issues I know people wanted to hear about. So I really appreciate your patience and your eloquence tonight addressing all of those topics, and look forward to the time when we can welcome you here in person.
Well, Rabbi, I hope you're more satisfied with my answers than I was with Justin Trudeau's today at question period.
Okay, let's not go there. Let's be nice. Let's be nice.
All right.
We're a nonpartisan place.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and our love, Jane.
Thanks, Erin. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thanks, Asher, as well.